It began with a quiet rustle behind the screen and a short scratch of the pen as she put down the period. The room smelled of wax and dried herbs, and it seemed as if the walls themselves held the memory of every day in the courtyard. She raised her head, listened to the footsteps in the distant corridor, and realized that the night had once again brought not silence, but new shadows. I welcome the audience. I am glad you are here, and I ask you to write in the comments where you are watching this video from. I hope you enjoy listening. Anna was the emperor's daughter, and was as accustomed to the sound of strangers' footsteps as she was to the rustling of pages. She kept a chronicle not for fame, but because she considered it her duty to record what the throne saw and how that view changed everything around it. She was often told that history loves loud wars, but she knew that the sharpest turns are hidden in the little things of everyday life, in a delayed scroll delivery, in an incorrectly placed seal, in a late visit from someone no one expected. In those days, troops of warriors from the west were marching on the capital. The city was buzzing like a fair. In the streets, people argued about roads, provisions, and rites of passage. In the palace, polite bows hid fatigue, irritation, and fear that a foreign power would penetrate too deeply. Anna wrote about this dryly and clearly, trying to record the obvious and at the same time not lose the meaning. She noticed that the closer the foreign banners approached the gates, the quieter the conversations at her father's office door became. One evening, the old eunuch Mikhail brought a scroll. He said he had received it at the gate from a man who called himself a pilgrim and asked him to deliver the scroll to the archives as if it were an ordinary grain report. Mikhail noted that the messenger had clean shoes, even though the roads were muddy, and his hands were covered in warm fat, as if he had recently eaten fatty meat, even though fasting was strictly observed in the city. Anna nodded and asked him to leave the scroll on the table. She decided to open it in the morning to check the seal against the register. The night was restless. She wrote a few lines in the chronicle about a new quarrel between the Latin knights and the city craftsmen over the price of feed. Then she looked at the scroll again. The seal was affixed evenly, but the wax had a dull hue and a strange smell, reminiscent of resin from shipbuilders' workshops. There was a tiny crack at the edge of the impression, as if the seal had been removed and reapplied. Anna called for the young scribe Nikita. He had been working in her office for 2 winters and was known for his diligence and particular accuracy in recording dates, which he always wrote out in words, not trusting numbers. Nikita noted that the seal belonged to the department responsible for supply routes, but one thin line was missing from the ornamentation. He said that the seal looked as if it had been carved by someone who was familiar with the type of seal but had never held the original in their hands. Mikhail became suspicious and insisted that the package be opened over a copper tray with charcoal, as taught in the courtyard, in case of powders or poisons. Inside was a note with brief notes and a sheet of paper with lines and dots, as if someone had clumsily drawn them. Anna recognized the cipher. The lines represented the names of monasteries, and the dots represented people who could confirm old promises. In the margins was a series of neat symbols, circles, crosses, and small birds. She remembered a tiny library in a convent outside the city, where in her youth she had seen a similar code in correspondence between the abbess and the administrator. At that time, a circle meant a person who could be relied upon, and a bird meant a false recommendation. Anna took the scroll to the archives to compare the manuscript with samples. At that time, peace talks were underway in the palace on how to distribute provisions and what oath the Western leaders would take. Everyone was smiling, but the smiles were dry. Outwardly, it was a melodrama with wounded pride and resentment over the first place at the table. Inside, it was already turning into a thriller, because too many people wanted Anna's chronicle to record the words they needed. In the archive, among the dust of old maps, weaving registers and letters to the treasurer, Anna called to Dora for help. She worked in the laundry and was listed by the archivist as an assistant. She was considered a silent shadow because she rarely spoke and always kept her hands in the water, wringing out heavy cloth. Todora was good at finding lost items in baskets, and, in a matter of minutes, she would sort the fabrics by date and owner. Mikhail once noticed that she looked at things the way a copyist looks at lines. He brought her to the archive to help with the records. Todora looked at the sheet with lines and lightly ran her finger over the ink. She said that the lines were placed on top of a thin drawing, as if someone had first sketched a road and then applied a code. She noted that one dot was slightly thicker than the others and offset from the general grid. This meant that it had been added later, and the hand of the person who added it had been shaking. Anna became interested. Todora added that she had seen a porter who complained about a strange smell of new resin in the workshops. He said that the craftsmen molded seals from fresh wax when they were paid in silver immediately. Anna decided to check the lists of people who had the right to touch the seals. A new clerk appeared on the list, recently hired through the recommendation of a noble family. The recommendations were signed by an old aristocrat, known for his connections with foreign merchants. Anna remembered that in the past, this house had already asked the treasury for money to repair ships, and then took a long time to repay the debt. A cautious note appeared in the margins of her notes that the family's mark often appeared near supply routes. On the same day, a simple parcel of dried fish was delivered to the kitchen. Mikhail asked a servant to take it to the storeroom because the smell was strong. When they began to unpack the parcel, a thin copper tube fell out of it. Inside was a strip of parchment with a short note and the mark of the same family. The parchment said that next week, people would come to the port who wanted to meet with trusted individuals about the tribute lists. It looked like ordinary business correspondence, but the method of delivery in a barrel of fish was too secretive for a normal transaction. The everyday situation with the purchase of fish turned into a cause for concern. Mikhail ordered a closer look at the supplier's connections, and Anna noted in the Chronicle that minor business matters often lead to people who truly control money and destinies. Meanwhile, Nikita brought her a scroll he had found in a distant chest. He said he was looking for tax lists and found a letter hidden in a false bottom. The letter was old and concerned a long-ago promise of marriage that had never been recognized. It mentioned a young woman from the provinces and a man whose name was spoken with respect in the capital. The letter was written cautiously, without direct admissions, but it had a date written in words and a hint of a witness who could confirm the fact. Anna put the letter aside, but she couldn't get it out of her mind. She noticed that Nikita had become paler than usual and was increasingly glancing at his own hand, where he had a thin, semicircular scar. Once, at the city market, Anna had seen a child with the same scar, left by a bracelet with a sharp clasp. Her memory noted the coincidence. A merchant woman from Venice arrived in the city. She was a widow and ran her business strictly but honestly. Her ship brought fabric and oils, and she quickly found common ground with the treasurer, who was tired of empty promises. The merchant offered to advance money for grain for passing troops if the court allowed her to transport the securities to one of the monasteries under guard to avoid theft in the port. The treasurer said it sounded like a trap, but she replied through an intermediary that she did not play double games. When Mikhail learned of this, he remarked that she could be trusted more than those who talked a lot about faith and asked for too much. Anna decided to take advantage of the offer. She said that some of the archive copies could indeed be transported to the monastery, and at the same time, they could check who would try to stop the caravan. It seemed like a simple administrative measure, but in reality, it became a lure for those who were used to working in the shadows. Rumors spread throughout the city about an imminent change among the high-ranking officials. Someone said that a letter was being prepared about the alleged voluntary renunciation of rights by one of the emperor's relatives in favor of another, more convenient to outsiders. Anna knew the value of such rumors. She understood that the plan was connected with the substitution of seals and that mysterious cipher, where the dots promised confirmation of old agreements. On the eve of the caravan's departure from the city to the monastery, Nikita came to Anna at night. He said he wanted to show her a mark on an old marriage letter. He pointed to a barely noticeable stitch that had been used to glue the edge of the parchment. Such stitches were used in villages in the north, where they were known from the craft of blacksmiths. Nikita said that his mother had told him about a man who had once promised to recognize his son, but then disappeared. He uttered a name that made everything click in Anna's mind. The name matched that of a man from the house whose seal appeared in recommendations and household records. Anna realized that she was holding the key to a twist that was connected not only to the treasury and seals, but also to blood. She noted in the chronicle that in the empire, blood rarely runs in a straight line and often stretches through forgotten knots. The caravan set out at dawn. Mikhail sat on a mule, accompanied by a small guard detachment. The merchant's wife provided several experienced people who knew how to drive carts through narrow streets and were familiar with the landmarks of dangerous neighborhoods. Todora sat on the rear wagon like a simple servant, but she held a bag with copies of the cipher and a small knife for fabric in her hands. She was asked to watch the patterns on the roads, just as she watches for stains on clothes. At the crossroads, two mercenaries who called themselves port guards attached themselves to the caravan. They said they had been ordered to escort the carts because of frequent attacks. Mikhail replied that the order was only valid on paper with the treasury seal and showed them his badge. The mercenaries hesitated, but did not fall behind. Then Todora noticed that there was shiny resin on the right boot of one of them and whispered to Mikhail that it was resin from the printer's workshop. He realized that these people were connected to those who made fake seals. In a narrow street, the mercenaries tried to block the way. Mikhail signaled the driver to slow down and raised his hand as if giving way. He said he would give the cart with the papers to the elder if he signed a receipt, and pulled out a smooth parchment prepared in advance by Anna. At that moment, guards came out of the alley, whom the merchant's wife had persuaded to come by paying off a recent debt. This was the unexpected intervention by an outsider. The merchant's wife did not have a high title, but she had the necessary connections and silver to bring order where the court was dragging its feet. The mercenaries tried to leave, but one was detained. They found a copper tube on him, the same one that had been pulled out of the barrel of fish. Inside the tube was a short list of names of those who were supposed to confirm the forged letter of voluntary renunciation of rights by a relative. The names matched the circles and birds in the cipher. Anna called together a small group of people she trusted. She said that she intended to use the story of the cipher not for ostentatious punishment, but to push those who had not yet crossed the line to confess. She knew that openly accusing a large house could lead to a riot, but a well-written chronicle and a well-chosen moment could lead the guilty parties to retreat on their own. In those days, Nikita hardly slept. He found another detail in the archive. On the back of an old letter was a word that his mother had repeated to him in childhood as a secret incantation. The word belonged to the household customs of a specific village where the family's smithy stood, whose name now appeared in the capital's lists. Nikita turned pale and said he was ready to confirm that he was that man's son. He knew that this discovery would do little for him personally, but it would help explain why the house had diligently hidden its old connection. Mikhail reacted calmly to the confession. He said that in such matters, it was not worth rushing, and that kinship had to be proven not only by words, but also by objects. Then, Todora brought a belt that she had found in a box of old items. The belt was woven in a special way, as in northern villages, and had the same sharp buckle that left a semicircular scar. Nikita showed his scar. The coincidence became even stronger. Anna decided to proceed with caution. She wrote a note summarizing the information about the forged seals and the people who had participated in the attempt to pass the false papers through the caravan. She did not name the main house directly, but provided enough details that those who needed to understand would understand. The note reached those who were waiting for an excuse to stop supporting dubious allies. Several minor officials refused to sign. One of the printing workshops closed. The house in question began to shift the blame onto mercenaries and minor intermediaries. They claimed that they had never interfered in the inheritance case, but had only helped people with their correspondence. Anna knew the value of such words. Her task was not to make a loud exposure, but to turn the tide of events so that the substitution of the letter would become impossible. She ordered a re-examination of all the seals. The officers were instructed to bring in the registers written in words. This slowed down the work, but it highlighted some strange coincidences. Under the new inspection, old letters about that very marriage promise surfaced. One of them bore the signature of a witness who was now under the patronage of the house. A random piece of the past became a strong link to the present, e.g., meanwhile, a new threat arose in the city. One of the servants who helped unload the carts suddenly fell ill. His lips swelled, and a strange burn appeared on his palm. The doctor said it looked like the mark of a poisonous mixture that was sometimes smeared on seals to prevent them from being opened unnecessarily. Anna realized that the game was going too far. She decided to take some of the copies to the convent where she had once studied. The caravan set off again. This time, it was accompanied not by city guards, but by monks. At the gate, a man in an expensive cloak approached them. He said he represented the interests of an influential house and that the caravan must stop. He presented a letter with a seal. Todora asked him to hold the letter up to the light and noticed a tiny grain of salt stuck to the edge of the wax. This would not happen on a real seal, which is made in a dry room. She said that the seal had been made in a hurry in the kitchen. Mikhail nodded and ordered them to continue on their way. The man in the cloak realized that no one was listening to him and backed off. It soon became clear that the house was not ready for an open confrontation. The city was growing tired of the squabbles, and the merchant's wife, who had invested the silver, told everyone that she was tired of other people's games. Her words spread through the market faster than decrees. By evening, Anna had gathered all the clues: the cipher with lines, the letter of betrothal, the belt with the lock mark, the copper tubes, the salt on the seal, and placed them in her notes so that each layer confirmed the other. She did not draw long conclusions, but simply stated the facts, dating them with words and inserting a dry remark about the coincidence of signs. It was not a grandiose accusation, but a calm account of what had happened. Nikita asked her to add a line stating that he acknowledged the fact of kinship and claimed nothing except the right to name his mother without shame. Anna agreed, but decided not to bring it to the forefront. She understood that there was a place in her chronicle for a person who remained in the shadows and made the right choice without demanding a reward. Mikhail suggested giving part of the fines to the monastery for safekeeping. He said that words are kept quieter within the walls of a monastery than within the walls of a palace. Anna agreed. She did not yet know that the path to the finale would lead to a scene where those who were despised would prove stronger than their noble relatives, and the man who stood in the shadows would become the one who would hold the ground beneath his feet. The summer grew hotter. The city grew tired and sluggish. In the markets, people argued only about bread and water. In such noise, big deals hid like fish under the silt. Anna noticed that when people got tired of talking about war, they were more likely to pay attention to those who promised quick solutions. This was understood by those who wanted to use fake papers to recalculate rights and places at the table. Guests from foreign troops began to visit the house of the aristocrat, whose seal appeared in every dubious affair more often. They said they wanted peace, but brought gifts with a hint. Inside the palace, no one wanted a direct confrontation. Anna decided that it was time to move the matter from a quiet dispute over papers to clear action that would not allow anyone to back down. She asked the treasurer to arrange an open display of the seals for all the senior scribes and craftsmen. The display was held in the square next to the archive. They brought pieces of wax, seal matrices, and registers where each line was written in words. Todora stood aside, holding a basket of fabrics in her hands, as if she had come to do her daily work. Western guests, hearing about the unusual gathering, also came. They were curious about how the empire maintained order. The demonstration began with a simple thing. In front of everyone, the master applied the treasury seal to the wax, and immediately began to talk about the small details that distinguish a real seal from a fake one. He pointed to the thin line that was made at the end, and the barely noticeable protrusion that appeared at a certain angle. Everyone recorded this in their memory blocks. Anna noted that people like simple rules if they are shown openly. Then the old master took out the seal that had been taken from the detained mercenary. He pressed it into the wax, and a pattern appeared on the surface, missing that very line. He said it was the work of a skilled imitator, but not someone who had held the original in their hands. The crowd began to whisper. The aristocrat's house sensed danger and tried to shut everything down. Their man said that time was up, but the merchant's wife, who had invested the silver, said through the scribe that her contract with the treasury included a clause giving her the right to be present during the inspection, and she insisted on continuing. Anna chose the moment and asked Todora to take a piece of cloth from the basket that the workers used to wipe the seals. There were traces of salt and resin on the cloth. Todora, without raising her voice, mentioned that the salt was taken from the kitchen of an aristocrat's house on a nearby street because it was cheaper there, and that its grains always ended up on the edges of the products. This simple detail from everyday life unexpectedly became the key to a great trick. The crowd gasped, not because of the loud revelation, but because of the clarity with which an everyday thing connected everything that was happening. Anna did not name names. She merely recommended that the treasurer temporarily stop issuing paper for external orders to those whose seals had not been discussed, and ordered that security at the printing workshop be increased. The next day, the workshop that had been making the forgeries closed, and its owner left for the port. The city took this as an admission of guilt. But the aristocrat's house was not going to give up. They decided to strike at a weak spot, at people they considered defenseless. In the evening, they conducted an inspection in the laundry room. People from the house came with an order, stating that the fabrics needed for the palace had been stolen and were being hidden at Todora's. They counted on fear and shame. Todora silently showed her baskets. In one of them was a tiny bundle that had not been there before. Inside was a gold ring with the same pattern as the fake seals. Todora was taken to the guardhouse. She did not cry or argue. Mikhail came there and said that he had seen an unfamiliar servant entering the laundry room through the back door during the day. He regretted not stopping him because he thought he was carrying a bucket. He sighed and added that mistakes happen, but they can be corrected if the right witnesses are found. Anna realized that a simple scene of checking laundry had turned into a real suspenseful drama. She decided not to let her enemies drag out the case. She asked the merchant's wife to act as a mediator because she had the right to appear at the guardhouse as the person who had provided security for the caravan. The merchant's wife came and said that she had seen this servant at the door of her warehouse when he was trying to carry out a box. She described his gait and noted that his left leg was lame. Mikhail confirmed that it was indeed such a man who had entered the laundry room. Then Anna pulled out an old inventory of the aristocrat's household items from a chest and found an entry about a servant with the same mark. The entry was made by the same scribe who had recently brought a recommendation for a new employee to the printing workshop. Thus, the silent objects formed a direct chain. Todora was released. No one apologized in the square, but people saw who was the strong link in this chain. Todora, who had previously been considered a silent worker, stood upright that evening and looked at the crowd without lowering her eyes. It was already difficult to imagine her as just a laundress. The aristocrat's house began to lose people. They understood that there would be no direct blow, but a chain of signs and trifles had formed to their detriment. All they could do was cover themselves with loud piety. They decided to make a donation to the temple and asked Anna to record it in the chronicle. She did so, but added a dry remark that the donations appeared the day after the seals and the laundry room were inspected. At this time, Nikita decided to take the final step. He brought Anna a small wooden icon that he carried on his chest. Inside, under a thin plate, lay a strand of hair and a small piece of paper with his mother's name and the symbol of his house. An old man had given him this icon on the road several years ago, saying that one day Nikita would understand where to take it. Nikita said he was ready to confirm to the monastery and the archives that he was the son of the man from the house who was now trying to shift the truth. He did not want to embarrass the court and asked only for the old mistake to be acknowledged. Anna thought about it. She understood that this step could bring the family secret into the public domain. But she also knew that without this clarity, the house would continue to play games. She decided that Nikita's confession would not be used as a weapon against anyone in particular, but would serve as a basis for restoring justice. Mikhail suggested holding a small but important meeting at the monastery. Present were the archivist, the abbess, the merchant's wife, 2 scribes, and an old judge who remembered many of the vows of years past. Nikita told his story calmly, without complaint. He said he did not demand a place or a title. He only wanted his mother's name to cease to be an empty sound. He admitted that the ring found in the laundry room had been planted by people at home to discredit Todor. The judge listened and said that he had enough evidence: the scar from the lock, the belt from the northern village, the icon, the entry in the old letter with the date written in words. He said that in such a case, the truth was not a loud cry, but a collection of quiet coincidences. The next day, Anna made an entry in the chronicle where she recorded the results. The seals were returned to the hands of trusted craftsmen. The caravans were protected. There were no more secret checks in the laundry, and a man named Nikita acknowledged his origins and renounced all claims. She added that the house, which had long been respected, would in future be judged not by loud words, but by the fine salt on the wax that had revealed the true place of work. The city gradually exhaled. The Western leaders got what they came for and warmly moved on. They didn't care who put the seals on in the capital. But for the people inside the walls, much had changed. Now everyone knew that a thin line on wax was more important than a loud speech in the square. Todora was appointed keeper of the fabrics and lists. Many were surprised. She was considered too simple, but her ability to see dirty marks where others saw clean canvas proved more important than beautiful phrases. She did not become arrogant. She continued to work with her hands, but now she was asked to look at documents as she looked at linen. Her best qualities came to the fore precisely when it was necessary to notice the small things. Mikhail quietly faded into the background. He did not demand a reward. Anna noticed that such people hold up walls more firmly than those who like to stand on balconies. She wrote in her notes that the old servant took a step at the right moment, bringing the right people together and saving Todora from a dirty accusation. He became that very underrated hero who, in a key scene, did not loudly proclaim himself, but simply remained standing when others retreated. The merchant's wife returned to her business. She did not ask for favors or remind anyone that her silver and the right words had stopped someone's dirty game. The Empire rarely thanks such people in writing, but Anna remembered her role. She knew that sometimes the chronicler's eyes need not coats of arms, but a simple note about a person who spent money and time and thus prevented foreign seals from coming into force. Nikita decided to go to a monastery. He said that it would be easier for him to keep words in order there than to keep people in order in the city. He thanked Anna for her restraint and said that she had saved his name from empty glory. Anna saw in him not the victory of blood over blood, but the victory of calm choice over noise. The last knot remained. The aristocrat's house, deprived of its shadow and familiar paths, tried to buy itself a new reputation by hiding under the wing of several Western leaders. They said that the house was useful to them, but when they were presented with dry records, where the dates of the words were written in words, and pieces of wax with irregular lines lay nearby, the leaders backed down. They did not need someone else's dirt, so the case ended not with execution or thunder, but with silence, which clearly explained everything that needed to be understood. Anna closed the book. She knew that history loves dramatic scenes, but true justice often comes at the moment when the pen puts the final dot and no one applauds. She looked back at her work over the past few months and saw in it not only a story about foreigners and seals, but also the stories of people who lived nearby. The woman from the laundry, who was considered a shadow, became the keeper of the lists. The old servant, who was forgotten after every errand, became the link. The merchant's wife from a distant city became the person who stopped the violence without a sword. A young scribe, whose name was never mentioned at feasts, found his place where words were more important than titles. She wrote that the chronicle seen from the throne does not have to be cold. It must be accurate. Accuracy does not diminish dignity or embellish lies. Accuracy gives the reader the opportunity to draw their own conclusions without unnecessary embellishment. That evening, she heard a rustle behind the screen again. Mikhail entered and said that it had become quieter outside. He added that the city was once again arguing about bread and water, which meant that life was returning to normal. Anna nodded. She knew that she would pick up her pen again the next morning. She left a small note in the margins. This time, the story did not fall into the abyss because it was held back by people without big names. She wished that those who opened her notes would not look for miracles and fire in them, but would see in the little things what really leads to the denouement. Let the reader understand how an everyday bundle of fish turns into a dangerous sign, how a simple cloth in the hands of a laundress reveals the salt of lies, how a small scar on the wrist reminds of an old promise that returns after many years. Let it become clear why an unexpected benefactor at the right moment is more important than a loud ally, why hidden talent triumphs over status, and why an underestimated person can withstand a blow better than those who are used to being bowed down to. This story did not become a song with lofty words. It remained a record where every action stemmed from people's choices. It was not gods or chance that saved order, but attention to detail and determination in the face of fear. This was the moral clarity that Anna was looking for. And this was her quiet triumph as a chronicler who heard the whispers of the court, but wrote in such a way that anyone could read her, regardless of where they sat, by the hearth, at the market, or in the palace chamber. Anna closed the window. Night brought shadows again, but now they no longer held the same threat. Somewhere in the monastery, a young scribe lit a candle and laid out clean sheets of paper. In the laundry room, Todora took the dried sheets off the line and folded them neatly, like the pages of a book. In the merchant's warehouse, under a dusty lid, lay an empty copper tube, turned into a harmless reminder of a tiny victory over someone else's cunning. And in the archive, at the very bottom of a large chest, lay a belt with a sharp lock, a reminder that the past does not disappear, but waits for the moment to add another quiet line to the denouement. Thus ended this cycle of records, without thunder, but with a clear denouement. And if someone opens the scroll many years from now, they will see not only plowed fields and campaigns, but also how ordinary people, often overlooked, hold large stones in place. And they will understand why in this empire, history should be written with words, not shouts, and why a pen that draws a precise line is sometimes stronger than a dozen spears at the gate.